She did not weep when she found her father collapsed in the barn with an empty bottle beside him. She only wept when she saw Daniel Cross come riding through the gate 3 days later. Grace Mercer had been running the ranch for 5 months. And in Red Bluff, that was already too long for a woman to keep what men believed they deserved. But the panic in her eyes that afternoon made every cowhand on the dirt road turn and look. Even if none of them had the guts to ask why she had ridden into town with her sleeves ripped and her hands trembling, she did not stop for anyone. She rode straight past the feed store, past the gambling hall where 2 men whistled at her mare, past the chapel steps where the minister gave her a sympathetic glance she did not want. She kept riding until she reached the one property everyone said belonged to a man who backed down from nothing. If this man turned her away, there would be no one left to ask. Daniel Cross. Most folks in Red Bluff only mentioned his name in whispers. Some called him a quiet blade. Others said he was the reason the cattle trails still had law. But what people understood for certain was simple. If trouble hunted you and you had nowhere else to go, you rode to the Cross Ranch and prayed he was in a listening mood. Grace did not pray. She swung off her horse and marched right up to him as he was mending a saddle on the porch. Daniel looked up slow as dawn, and she swore his gaze could read every secret a person had ever kept. For the first time since the burial, she felt like someone was truly looking at her, not just at her widow's shawl. He asked if anyone had followed her. She nodded. Then she told him everything she remembered. The poisoned water trough at her ranch near the foothills of the Sierra Range, the fence posts pulled up in the night, the shadow that circled her house after midnight, the voice outside her stable whispering that a woman alone had no business holding cattle land in California territory. Daniel listened without flinching. The wind pushed dust across the boards. A dog lying near his boots lifted its head like it sensed danger coming. Out here, even the animals knew when trouble was riding in, and this did not feel like the kind that passed quietly. When Grace finally spoke the name Clayton Wade, Daniel's jaw tightened just once, like a man hearing an old scar crack open again. He knew that name. Everyone did. Cattle baron, land grabber, man who claimed her father's death had been nothing more than bad luck and bad whiskey. Grace stepped forward. Her voice cracked. She said she did not come for comfort. She came because someone wanted her ranch and someone wanted her buried, and she needed a man who did not scare when the wolves came howling. Daniel set down his tools, looked toward the hills, then looked back at her like he was measuring how much fight she still carried. He asked one question, a low one, the kind that sets the whole path before a single step is taken. Are you ready for what you might learn if we dig into this? And Grace answered with a question of her own. What if what I learn is worse than the man who killed my father? Daniel saddled his horse without another word, and Grace rode beside him all the way back to Mercer Ranch. Trying not to think about the look she had seen in his eyes when she said the name Clayton Wade. It was not fear. It was something colder, like a door he had locked years ago and did not want to open. By the time they reached the ranch, the late sun was pouring that hard California gold across everything, making every shadow look longer than it should. Grace kept talking to stop her mind from racing. She pointed at the broken water pump, the trampled hay, the scrape marks she had found near the barn door. Daniel only nodded, crouching to examine boot prints she had missed. He did not explain what he saw. He never did. But when he stood back up, she knew. Someone had been here. He walked toward the side porch where a large feed sack sat slumped against the old wooden bench Grace had been trying to shift that morning. She felt embarrassed just remembering it. She had tugged and heaved at that thing for a solid 20 minutes before giving up. Daniel knocked the side of it with his knuckles, testing the weight, then looked at her with the faintest grin. "It is too big for you to move alone." "Too big? Just sit on it so I can check what is wrong with this bench frame." The way he said it made her roll her eyes, but her pulse still jumped. It was unfair how easy it was for a steady man to do that, especially one who barely spoke. She stepped toward the feed sack, gathered her skirt just enough to keep from tripping, and prepared to sit so he could inspect the wood joints beneath. That was when she felt it. A shift, a ripple, something alive pressing up from inside the sack. Grace froze, her breath caught sharp in her throat. She looked down. The fabric bulged, then moved again. She jerked backward with a gasp, heel catching on the edge of the porch, and she stumbled hard. Daniel lunged forward and caught her by the waist, his arm locking tight to keep her upright, her hands clutching his vest as she pressed into his chest. Only then, with her heart still hammering against him, did he pull his revolver. One clean shot tore through the sack. Something inside thrashed once, then went still. Daniel ripped the fabric open. A fat diamondback rattlesnake lay coiled and dead, its fangs still bared. Grace stared at the creature lying exactly where her body had been about to rest. If she had sat down one breath sooner, this story would have ended on that porch. Her skin crawled, her stomach twisted, and for the first time, she wondered if that snake had crawled there on its own. Because when Daniel lifted the sack to look closer, his face shifted in a way that made her blood run ice cold. Why was there a leather strap tied around the snake's tail? Daniel held that dead rattlesnake like it was a piece of evidence, not just an animal. Grace watched his eyes narrow, steady but sharp, the way a tracker reads a broken branch in the brush. He turned the body slightly, and there it was. A thin leather cord pressed deep into the scales near the tail, like someone had bound the snake, carried it in, and dropped it exactly where she was meant to sit. Grace felt rage bloom in her chest, the kind of rage she thought she had buried with her father. Someone wanted her gone. Someone wanted her frightened enough to run or foolish enough to die. And that someone knew exactly where she lived, where she walked, and where she sat in the mornings when she drank her coffee. Daniel set the snake down and wiped his hands slow and deliberate. He did not raise his voice. He did not curse. He did not even look surprised. He just looked tired of men who thought they owned the whole valley. He asked Grace if she had noticed anything missing, anything moved, anything strange. She shook her head, though she remembered the feed sack leaning crooked and the bench rails tucked under it like someone had handled them in a hurry. Daniel walked around the porch, studying the dirt. Grace followed, watching how he pointed with his chin at scuff marks, torn grain, little things she would never have caught. Then he crouched near one clear boot print by the corner of the house, a print with a deep gouge in the heel, the same kind of heel she had seen on the boots of Clayton Wade's ranch boss. She swallowed hard. Daniel did not say the name. He did not have to. Grace said it for him. "It is Clayton. It has to be." Daniel wiped his palms on his jeans, looked toward the distant ridge, and let the silence hang between them. Some things do not need saying. Both of them already knew the only name that matched those tracks. He told her they would not wait for the next snake. They would not hope the marshal would care. They would lay the trap themselves, catch the man who thought he owned her land, and finish this before someone finished her. The plan he laid out was simple, but it carried the kind of risk that made Grace's heart pound in her ears. She was not the same woman she had been 5 months ago. She felt sharper now, like something inside her had finally stopped bending and started biting back. Daniel asked her if she was ready, truly ready, because once they began, there would be no turning around. Grace looked at the dead snake, then at the tracks in the dirt, then at the man who had caught her when she fell. She nodded. If you are enjoying this story, consider subscribing so you do not miss the next part. And while you settle in with a warm cup of tea, tell me what time it is where you are and where you are listening from. Grace barely slept that night, not from fear, but from the way Daniel's plan kept circling in her mind like a hawk over open ground. By sunrise, the two of them were already moving around the ranch, quiet and focused, setting things exactly the way Daniel wanted. He told her the trick to catching a man like Clayton was simple. You do not hunt him. You let him think he is hunting you. So Grace played her part. She rode into Red Bluff late that morning, boots dusty, hair loose, looking like a woman barely holding on. She stopped by the general store, then the livery. Then she walked right past the gambling hall where Clayton liked to sit on warm afternoons. She pretended not to see him, which of course made him watch her even harder. Every step she took past that hall felt like she was walking out on a cliff with no rope. When he stepped onto the boardwalk and asked if she was managing all right, she let her shoulders sag just enough to look defeated. She told him she had barely slept, told him a snake nearly bit her, told him Daniel had gone back to his own ranch and she would be alone tonight at Mercer Ranch. She even let her voice shake when she said, I have been thinking maybe you were right about selling. A woman cannot hold this place alone much longer. Then she said the line Daniel had coached her to say. I do not know if I can keep fighting this. Maybe letting the ranch go would be smarter. Clayton smiled at her like a coyote that had finally cornered the rabbit. He wished her a safe evening and told her he hoped she made the wise choice. Grace nodded politely, turned her horse, and rode home calm as Sunday. But the moment she reached Mercer Ranch, her mask dropped. Daniel was already in the barn loft checking his rifle. Two of his trusted men were posted near the windmill, hidden from view. Grace felt safer than she had in months. Evening fell fast. The sky turned purple. The land cooled enough that even the grass seemed to stop moving. Grace lit one lamp in the house and left the front door cracked just enough to look careless. She sat at the table with her heart pounding like a drum inside a canyon. When the first hoofbeats came, she knew. 3 horses moving slow, careful, predators, not visitors. Grace stood up and gripped the small pistol Daniel had given her. She reminded herself she was not bait. She was part of the plan. Whatever happened tonight would decide if she stayed a victim or became the true owner of this land. A shadow stepped into the doorway. A man with a bandana around his neck and a smirk that said he had done this before. He told her to pack her things and come easy. She told him to get off her property. The fight that followed was not graceful. It was desperate and loud and real. Grace swung a cast-iron skillet into his shoulder. He stumbled. She fired once into the ceiling, not to hit, but to call the storm she knew was waiting in the dark. The crack of that gunshot brought Daniel out of the shadows like lightning. And just like that, the trap was sprung. But what Daniel found outside the house was something even he did not expect. Who was the man crouched behind the water trough, and why did he look more terrified than dangerous? Daniel reached the corner of the barn with his rifle raised, ready to end it. But the man hiding behind the water trough was not aiming a weapon at him. He was shaking, hands up, eyes wide like a cornered animal. He kept stammering that he never wanted to hurt Grace, that he had only come because Clayton forced him. He said Clayton paid extra for the snake. He said Clayton planned to torch the ranch after running Grace off for good. That was when Grace realized this was not just about land and cattle. It was about erasing her name from the valley entirely. His voice broke like he had finally reached the end of a long road paved with fear. Daniel lowered his rifle just enough for the man to breathe. Then he stepped closer and asked the question Grace had been too afraid to voice for months. Why did Clayton want her ranch so badly? The man told them about a new railroad spur Clayton wanted to control. A route that cut straight through Mercer Ranch, a line that could make him rich and give him even more power in Red Bluff. Grace listened, standing in the doorway with dust in her hair and a pistol still trembling in her hand. She felt something inside her shift. Not fear, not anger, something steadier, something stronger. Daniel signaled to his men. And together, they took the man into town before sunrise. Red Bluff woke to a confession that spread like wildfire. A confession about murder, threats, the snake, the plan to burn the ranch. It was enough for the marshal to ride out with a dozen men and drag Clayton Wade from his fancy veranda before breakfast. When it was over, the town felt different, quieter, lighter even. People tipped their hats at Grace for the first time, not because she was a widow, but because she had survived something meant to break her. It felt strange carrying respect on her shoulders instead of pity, but it fit better than she expected. And she had not done it alone. Later that evening, Grace and Daniel sat on the same porch where the rattlesnake had waited for her. The sky over the Sierra Range was the kind of soft gold you only see after a storm clears. Daniel told her the land had a way of testing people, the same way life tested people. He said, "You do not get to choose the hard days, only the way you stand through them." Grace smiled at him. She told him she was tired of standing alone. Daniel did not say anything. He did not speak for a long moment. Then he turned her hand palm up, tracing the calluses she had earned these past months with his thumb, slow and careful, before closing her fingers inside his own. And maybe that is the lesson in all this. Sometimes life knocks you down so you can see who will help you back up. Sometimes fear shows you the strength you did not know you had. Maybe you know that feeling yourself. The moment you look back and realize you survived the thing you thought would finish you. And sometimes the person you trust most arrives the moment you stop running. Before we move to the next story, I want to ask you something. What would you have done in Grace's place? And who would you hope to have standing beside you when the trouble comes? If you felt something from this story, give this video a like and subscribe so you do not miss the next chapter. Now, take a sip of your tea, settle in, and tell me where you are listening from.